Right one, yeah?
Oh, there we go. This should work.
They could do configuration management, put it into a version controlled system, and keep it reasonably separate from the content in the database itself. And so this is what you played as well. A bunch of files. Really puts all the that's a module. There's another thing that
ordinances and stuff standing in the way. Unfortunately, that neighborhood is not on the city street.
Okay, I'm going to go and get the head real quick and then get wired up.
But it's also very wet. So there's doesn't perk well. So you're really stuck with making up with grandfather, whatever existed before. So how's life going, Peter?
Oh, I don't think I can complain much.
We're doing good anyway.
Well, that's true too. Our biggest problem is too much to do. When I then stop working, then got all fun stuff to do. So it's a little time.
For this because
You have lots of kids to go buy Christmas gifts for?
No, well, no, the one we have is starting 32. So, 32.
Yeah, now it's about the time
Well,
to start having grandkids.
I'm trying to convince my wife about that, but we tend to go overboard. He just got married a couple of years ago, so there's been a lot of, I would say, wedding, post-wedding, moving into the house kind of things and stuff like that.
Does he live in the neighborhood area?
Nope. Well, they're closer to here. They used to live just above the Beltway in Maryland. Now they are even further up. Shoot, what's the neighborhood called? They have a 1 hour commute south to get to DC.
Well, but you don't have to fly to the West Coast to see them.
No. But it's a 3 hour drive for me.
my closest relative is in Brooklyn.
It's a what, sorry?
It takes 4 hours to drive to New York and another 45 minutes to get to Brooklyn. The last time I was there, a taxi cab drove into my car.
Yeah, I was in New York for for meeting, and the flight got canceled, and it wasn't meeting with the last flight. So it was get one in the morning and said, no, didn't work out. And I was like, well, I'm going to go faster than you guys getting home with the plane. It's 4 hours, but 4.5.
US court yes. You know, when the Chief Justice needs to change, he calls somebody else and then make sure it gets control. The spelling and all.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. As I mentioned, if anyone needs an AWS instance to play along with John during this, let me know. I've got 4 more left. As I mentioned, 3 if anyone needs an AWS instance, so let me know. Good morning, everyone. If you want it now, or let me know. I've got 4 more left. Well, 3 if anyone needs an AWS instance, so let me know. Good morning, everyone. If you want it now, or let me know. I've got 4 more left. Well, 3 if anyone needs an AWS instance, so let me know. Good morning, everyone. If you want it now, or let me know.
So where's my wire?
That's your wire.
Is it on? Yes.
It's on. Verify the time. I don't just like set up right now. That's your wire. I cannot hear anything.
Is it on?
Just playing it here.
No audio at all? Really?
I don't know.
Welcome, everyone. And you found this one. Okay. All right. My name is John Kennedy. Mark led you downstairs tonight.
Rhymes with frisbee, spelled like hors d'oeuvre.
Greg was the organizer until just a couple months ago. He stepped down and
Rhymes with frisbee, spelled like hors d'oeuvre.
It's obvious we have our meetings every second Saturday of the month here.
Rhymes with frisbee, spelled like hors d'oeuvre.
And we also have a mailing list that is very active and very helpful for those who didn't find us in that way. If you want to sign up for the list, come see me afterwards, and I'll show you the links and all that. As I said at the beginning, for John's presentation, John has a virtual box image with Silkscreen ready to go. I also have a few AWS EC2 instances. If you're interested in an EC2 instance, let me know and I can give you the details for it. AWS EC2 instances. And outside of that, EC2 instance, let me know. We do have a speaker for next month, but we are always looking for speakers. The only restriction is obviously it needs to be open source because Linux is open source, and while we are a Linux user group, it doesn't have to necessarily be Linux focused. Just open source. So with that being said, I will turn it over to John, who will guide us through an install best and sidechain for Silkscreen.
Yes, indeed. Welcome. So we're going to be put together a site. We're going to build it from the ground up, from the OS up if you need to. Otherwise, as John mentioned, we also have some VMs and a VirtualBox image that's ready to go. If you need to. Otherwise, as John mentioned, we also have some. Start with the lamp VM and VirtualBox image. So, how many of you guys have got? I don't see a lot of laptops out there. Okay. You need an OS, obviously. Linux, LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. That's what it stands for. But there's variants, WAMP and MAMP and BAMP and who knows what else. If you really wanted to install, you could probably do it on Emacs. You need a web server. We're going to be using Apache 2.4. You also need a database. And you're going to need PHP and a whole mess of extensions. When you first try to launch the site, if you don't have all the extensions, it'll actually warn you that something is missing. And there's a couple of features in the site, in the software, that if you don't have an extra extension or two, then it'll warn you that, yeah, hey, in order to do this operation, you're going to need, I think it's like curl and PHP zip. And there's another one coming up soon where it'll warn you that, yeah, hey, in order to do this operation, you're going to need, I think it's like curl and PHP zip. And there's another one coming up soon where it'll warn you that Silkscreen supports itself. And there's probably more ways of doing it. Consult your system administrator. And the other thing that we're going to need is mod rewriting. There's a .htaccess file that rewrites pretty much everything. So that it's Silkscreen index.php is what is always in those. And everything else is just into parameters that are passed into index.php. So when you look at the URL itself, it's going to be my/b/c. And everything else is just into parameters that are passed into index.php. So when you look at the URL itself, it's going to be. And I try to make it. Can these lights go off easily? And I try to make it. Can these lights go off easily? That's much better. Server name. You'll need that if you're running this in a virtualized server admin. The document root, make sure it ends with a slash, and make sure it matches what you have here in the directory. And most of this is already in a file in Debian and Ubuntu called 000_default.conf. The key part that you're going to need is this directory section here. And really the two biggest ones are allow override. The symlink is useful but not mandatory. And of course that allow, but it's just because there's an access file in Apache.
So the automated install doesn't set this up?
The automated install does not set this up, no. It assumes that you've got a LAMP stack in place already. And the other thing is the log level, it's uncommented, it's commented out here, but just take out that little hash so you have log level debug. If you run into problems, check the logs, and maybe it'll tell you why something's going wrong. Is anyone here trying to do it as we're talking? You are? Okay. So do you need?
Yeah, I need Wi-Fi though.
Oh.
Navigate 17. Yes. Wi-Fi.
Navigate 17.
Yeah. Number 17, all lowercase, one word.
Okay, thank you.
We used to have a big sign on the door, but I think our security guys decided that
Network. It's not supposed to be secure. of that is a part of security. It's supposed to be. Yeah. Once you got that, now we need to actually install the software. So we're going to be using Apache 2 and libapache 2 mod PHP. It's going to add a mess of extensions that you need to add in on top of it. Type that in and John. Everything works. In the previous slide. That has the comp files for all of the sites that are present on this particular server. You use a called specific sites, and all it does is symlink this from sites available into sites active. But it makes it really easy to just kind of put out a sample configuration and then let the administrator turn it on when they're ready for it. You'll need to enable the module rewrite. We'll do that for you. Again, it's just symlinking into mods enabled from mods available, all the rewrite pieces. And it's actually smart enough to say, hey, this has a requirement of some other module, or and symlink that in as well. We want to turn off the default site that comes with it, because it's just going to get in the way. And we want to turn on our own site. We don't need to restart yet because we've got a few other things we need to install before we do. Do you need to see that?
John, you're going to have the slides available?
Sure. Ready to go? Okay. Now we need to install the PHP extensions. You need PHP MySQL, Silkscreen, Postgres. So if you're using this with Postgres, replace that with PHP PGSQL instead. GD is there for, it's a graphics library, which will, Silkscreen has a way of, you upload an image and then you say, on this page I want it to be 100 pixels wide and 200 pixels tall, and it will automatically scale it down using PHP GD before it sends it out to the client. And we'll actually cache it as well, so you only have to do it once. JSON is because all the configuration stuff is stored in JSON. XML because we're doing a whole bunch of HTML and XML, and I think the XML is also used for, no, the AJAX is all done with JSON. I forget exactly where the XML comes in, but it may be just to make it easier to parse HTML as well. And MB string multi-bytes, the UTF-8 stuff that we're going to be working with. If you set up MySQL to support 4-byte characters, then you can put emojis in to everything, including like titles, title fields and whatnot. Zip and curl will be useful when we get to the part about installing additional modules, because it'll actually reach out and grab packages from, well, it's actually from backdrop.org and install them. those packages that it pulls down are zip files, so it needs PHP zip to unpack it. If you want to run the test, you also need these, and I think when you installed Apache's mod PHP, it automatically installed PHP CLI, but you'll need that if you want to use either the command line tool that helps manage it, or if you want to run all the tests. And just because they're kind of useful, unzip and git would be good things to add into your system as well if you don't already have them. We're going to be pulling in, the way I'm going to recommend that you pull it in is to use git to just clone it straight from GitHub. But it's also just useful for when you're building a site, as you add a new module, as you change some config, to be able to just commit all that into a repository so you know how you built the site over time. And now that we've got everything in place, now it's a good time to restart Apache, and everything should be up and running pretty well. Except we don't have a database yet. So we need to install Maria client and the MariaDB server, and then go into Maria. And if it goes well, then that's the response you should see from Maria. Again, we're going to be using UTF-8 just so that we have internationalization easily done. It might actually just be the default character set by default for Mario, which would be a sensible thing to do. Can't pick anymore. Second thing you need to do is actually grant some user the ability to connect to it. Now, the login that I have on the VirtualBox is also Silk with, and also a password screen. But this here is actually specifically for Maria. It's not a system account, so you can make that whatever you like. I tend to use Silk just because I know it's going to be the Silkscreen that's going to be connecting into the database. And give you guys a second to catch up. Any questions so far? Everything's perfectly clear, clear as vodka?
I told you to leave it go. Mariah is spelled with an H.
Because Maria is apparently the name of the daughter of the guy that forked it, I think.
Yeah. I'm from Iscoma over here.
Yeah.
This is the fun thing about language. Tomato or tomato. Yes, exactly.
How does Linus pronounce his name, and how does he pronounce Linux? There's actually an audio recording out there that says, "Hi, I'm Linus Torvalds, and I pronounce it."
Exactly, but yeah.
Yeah.
When you check the sound on it.
Oh, really? time to actually get the software. The GitHub page is at Silkscreen CMS/Silkscreen on GitHub. And just to do the quick git clone, go into create a directory called Silkscreen. This window is kind of concerned that we might be hammering for wireless, but we have like laptops here. Yeah. Technically connected. Really? Okay. Are they all sharing like one telephone connection?
Next.
Yes. Years ago, they used the RIP routing protocol to basically say, yeah, everything goes through. Send like back, everything went back. But they took a look at it. All right, so you need to set up the next feature your document root, and then make sure this particular, this is the correct one for Debian and Ubuntu. I think for Fedora and Red Hat, the user is HTTPD, I think. And not quite yet. So if you've got it open, let's take a look in settings at PHP. In fact, I'm going to bring it up here. Where we get to play with font sizes again. Settings. There it is. Yeah, I know. Fix that. In fact, let me grab a spare chair if you don't. Well, in the file, it's just, text. And your editor gets to make it as pretty or ugly as you like. Right. You should control the horizontal, you should control the vertical. Exactly. That just doesn't make sense anymore with LED flat screens. There is no horizontal or vertical to control. To tune it? Okay, so the pieces that we are really interested in, if you already know the database stuff, then you can just put it into here, and you replace MySQL with Postgres, and you can use that. User path, user password, blah, blah, blah. There is an issue in the issue queue that's going through. If you have certain special characters, then it won't work. Hash, semicolon, and @ can't be in your password because then this becomes unparsable. There is, however, a patch in the queue that will say, okay, if you encode it as a proper URL with little hash numbers or percent something, then it'll decode it and it'll work just fine. The problem, of course, is also when you're going through the main setup, there's a place where you can put in the database name, username, and password, and right now it doesn't encode it properly either. So if you have that in your password, then it just won't work, period. And it gives a really confusing error, too. So there's a second bug that we're going to be putting in that will say, hey, we couldn't actually parse the database URL. There might be something wacky with it. Go and take a look at it, and you can fix it up. Oh, what else do we have down here? The other major piece is the configuration files. By default, in Silkscreen, the configuration is in, yeah, this must be the default now, is in the database. And there's both an active and a staging. And the reason that we have two, the active is what's actually being used by the site. Anytime that you read or write to the configuration is going to go into the active configuration store. The staging one is the one that we use while we're developing. We figure out all the settings that we want for the next release. We can then take that and export that out. We copy that into the staging directory, which is usually a files directory. Use Git to commit that, push it up to production, and then we can just, with one press of the button, say, import the new configuration. And it just reads everything from there and merges it in. It makes configuration management, for those of you who've ever done it with Drupal 6 or 7, and had the long, long checklists like you were an Apollo astronaut to actually launch the next release, this makes it so much easier. There's some drivers, and we can get into this later on, where not just database, but there's other things that we support as well for the configuration. One is layered, so you can actually have a memory override that is on the top layer, and then the next layer would be the database config, and then have a file directory as a third layer. And if it doesn't find it in the memory, it'll look for it in the database. If it can't find it there, then it'll look for it in the files. Is there anything else we got down here? This will be set during the installation. You don't need to set it. If your base URL is something kind of odd, if it's on an odd port or if it is in a subdirectory, then you'll need to adjust that, get it to work properly. There's a piece in the HT for that as well. And then if you need some extra PHP settings, you can override them here. If you're running with both .www and the regular of top-level domain, whatever you're running, example.com, then you probably want to uncomment this and set the cookie domain properly so that someone who logs into example.com then goes to www.example.com. They're still logged in because it's going to be using the same cookie. Kind of a pain to have to relog in just because you changed the host name. Most of these, if you need them, you'll need to talk to your system administrator. htaccess has got a few things in here as well that you might need to muck with. In particular, if you want to force HTTPS, do that in here. If you want to force it to be all dub all the time or all not dub, or if you have it in a subdirectory, you may need to make some changes down in here. It's pretty well documented, and if you've worked with the same thing in Drupal 7, it's damn near identical. So that was the settings, htaccess. Sites, we'll take a quick look at that as well. With one copy of source code, you can actually run multiple sites. Each site has got to have a settings.php file, and it has to have a files directory for saving when someone uploads their headshot, or if you've got graphics for some of your articles. And you can set it so that in the sites directory, where this file is, you can say site example.com goes to the directory example, sites example.org goes to example-org, sites NovaLUG.com goes to NovaLUG, and in doing so, have one deployment of Silkscreen supporting multiple sites at the same time. I actually use this. There's a company that I work with that has a whole bunch of little training seminars. They're all web-based training things. And they have sites for each particular one, but they're all basically the same site, just with slightly different content for, depending on what the topic of the webinar is. So we created it using just one copy of Silkscreen, put a whole bunch of different sites directories in for each particular one, and that way when we need to go do an update for security or whatever, upload one set of code, clear the caches on each individual site, and we're done. We don't have to do an update of each site individually. So it's a lot faster and a lot cleaner. And make sure that you don't forget one. If you've worked with Drupal 7, this was something in there as well. And now it's magic time. You point your browser to your VM, you should get a page that has this right in the middle of it. So do we need to set up any VMs now? We've got some AWS micro VMs ready to go. Backdrop does support languages other than just English, and you can change it from one to the other. By default, it does do English. If everything is going right, then it will skip this page entirely. Otherwise, it'll give you a checklist of, here are all the things I was looking for, and I couldn't find, I don't know, PHP GD or something like that. If you're working with the VirtualBox thing, as we saw with the setup before, database name is Silkscreen, username is Silk, password is Screen. Under the advanced options, if you need to set up a database prefix, it used to be that when you went to a hosting site, you got a limited number of databases. And if you want to run multiple sites without having to pay for more databases, well, you just create a lot more tables. And you just prefix each table with the name of the site. Made a big, a giant database instead of several small ones, but it worked. And that's one of the options that still lives on here, even though it's not really used by many people anymore. It is, however, used by the test scripts. Each test that is running concurrently will set up a microsite, essentially, inside the database with simple test ID number and then as the prefix. That way we can get multiple tests running at the same time without actually interfering with each other. Click OK, and you should get a screen like this. It'll progress for a few seconds in order to get everything set up. And then you should get to the site, the configure site screen. When you create the primary user account, I recommend that you make it admin. The first user that you create has special powers. It's essentially root. And any permission that is in the system is automatically granted to him. In fact, it doesn't even have to be in the system. The user access check says, oh, you're UID 1. I'm not even going to look and see if it's in the database. You're just good. Return true. Down at the bottom of this page is a section that says you want to check for updates and where should you send the updates to. Also, you set the time zone. And once you're done, you should be presented with this page here. So how are we doing back there? Back to slide 1. Want the VirtualBox? Mm-hmm. Can you? We have it up on the web as well. The slides, no, but I will be putting them up. Actually, I can put the. Do I have the slides up? Maybe I already did put the slides up. Yeah. So you got. I think that's the one you need. John, do you have the email that has the link? Because you can download the VirtualBox image off of my cloud instance. Broke your thing. Sorry. Nope. Okay. Are you ready? Okay. There is a Drupal 7 package that does most of this. I mean, it pulls in all the dependencies and whatnot. It doesn't create. It has a .conf file for just a directory. So if you go to your site / Drupal 7, then you'll get a Drupal 7 site kind of preset and ready to go. And it does actually, using the debconf stuff, let you create and manage a database that way. I haven't created a Debian package to match it yet, but yes, it can entirely be a package, and eventually will be. The Backdrop guys have got a Docker image as well that you can download and just run. It actually has a dependency on a MySQL Docker image as well. It reaches out to an external MySQL one. Doesn't put it all into one. But the code is all there. Good? Backdrop is what I forked from, yes. If you find an issue with Silkscreen, there is a separate so Silkscreen is one repository. Silkscreen-images is a second project in that same thing. And that's where all the issues for the project go. And that's so that I can give people access to add and update image issues without having access to update the code. There's some issue with that at GitHub where the permissions for the two are basically combined. So. Good? Okay. When you download the OVA and you try to install it, it's going to be completely confused about the network stuff. Might be okay because you're on a Mac. Yes. And in fact, you may have to. When I brought up the OVA on a Linux box, it gave me 4 tabs on the network administration thing, all of which said adapter 0. It should say adapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I had to tell it, no, make it bridged, and make sure it's enabled, and plug the cord in. And I had to do all 3 of those things because all 3 were just not turned on by default. And then I was able to actually connect in. Also, make sure you change the MAC address when you start up, reinitialize the MAC address, because otherwise the VM that I have here and the one that's on your machine is going to be fighting for the same packets. Let's go through all the various things. There's obviously content is a content management system, and that's broken down by content types. Each content type can have a bunch of fields. They're called fieldable entities because users, content, and comments at the very least are all entities. Taxonomy terms are actually entities as well, and they all basically can use the same code to make them to add fields onto them. So just in the same way that you can have an article with an image and a URL and maybe a video link, you can do the same thing with a user profile and say, we want to have a bio and a headshot and their homepage. Themes, which is just how we can make our sites all look different. The themes are basically prepackaged CSS and some structure. Modules, which extend the functionality of Silkscreen. Like Google Analytics is one module, and all it does is put the little bit of JavaScript up at the top of a page and say, connect me to send the analytics off to Google. It also does a lot more than that because there's you can say don't show it for administrators or don't show it on these pages. And so that way you can say, we're actually capturing data from our users as opposed to from the admins or the content managers who are using the thing all day long. Because otherwise, we have a giant spike here at Red Hat and nothing everywhere else. And that's because all the content managers are working in one building. Other modules, one of the ones that we're going to be taking a look at is called DateTime Format Helper. And there's a one page on the site where you can configure new DateTime formats. So it can say Wednesday, November 17th, 2017. But maybe you just want it to be all short, wed, comma, nov 1717. Or you just want the date, or you just want hours. So you can set all that up. And it's all configured using PHP's date formatting stuff, which you basically just use letters in order to represent individual pieces. Like a capital Y, I think, is the full year, 2014. But then I can never remember. I think I is minutes with a 0 leading. But I don't know what M and capital M are, if they're minutes or if they're month, or if they're short month or long month or numbered month or what. And so I've got a module that just at the bottom of that page adds in all that documentation, so it's right there, easy to find. I mean, that's just the simplest example of a module that we can have for the layouts. On a page, you're going to have your main content. Are you going to have a sidebar on the left, on the right? Maybe one or the other. Are you going to have underneath that 3 little boxes where you can put in calls to action? Are you going to put under that a block of 4? The layouts let you change how a page looks, and that can be set by content type or by path, or if there's some other parameters that you can trigger off of to say, when you're showing the user profile, show it with a right sidebar, but when you're showing everything else, have a left sidebar. When you're on the front page, we want to have 3 at the top, then a big block, and then 3 underneath that, and then a set of 4 regions under that. And we're going to be dropping blocks into all of these things. That's what we look at next, is the blocks. A block is just a little section of HTML. The login, if you've got a little login thing on the left side of the screen, that would be a block. If you have this week's latest video, that could be a block. A Twitter feed could be put into a block. I mean, it's a little bit of a code that calls out to a function that says, what should I be putting in here? And it returns just some rendered HTML. Menus, I can think of 4 off the top of my head. There's an administrator menu that is at the top of the screen when you're logged in as an admin. There's a primary navigation menu, which is going to have home, about us, products, all the stuff that the users are going to be looking at. There's a navigation menu, which is typically where you'd stick things like user login and log out, or my profile. And that, in a lot of sites I've seen, gets shoved up into the upper right-hand corner. It's a little bit smaller, but it's there to be accessible without being part of the main menu. And then oftentimes there's a footer menu at the bottom of a page that just has the about us and the privacy policy and the legal and the terms of service, and maybe an index of the site as well. Taxonomy, content, users, comments, a lot of things, anything that is an entity, you can tag with taxonomy. Taxonomy is basically, if you want to tag content of, this is about politics, this is about cats, this is about trees. And if you have like cat and tree, well, that could be an article about a cat up in a tree, or maybe just a photo if you've got an image content type, or a video. Views. So when you've got the content, each piece of content is called a node. Each node has got its own page. If you've got the About Us node, it's going to have its own page, and it's just the title and the article. If you have a profile, profile is probably a bad example. A NovaLUG event meeting, that would have in it the name of the meeting, the presenter, when and where it is, a quick explanation of what's going to be presented, and after the fact, if it's a past one, it'll have a video of what Peter is recording here, posted under there as well. Each of those is just one piece of content, but then you can use views to say, find me all the content that is a meeting in the past, and then present me a list of those. And maybe you want it as a table, maybe you want it just as a bulleted list, maybe you want to do something a little more fancy with a bunch of fields. so you can see each piece of it. One site that I did, it was a site for a training conference, and we had one page that was all of the presenters that they had there, and it would have on the left their headshot, then their name, the little blurb of what they're doing, and underneath that there was another sub-view that said, now find me all the presentations that this guy is doing and give me a short list of them. And then we just made that into a giant page. Views is what lets you do that, and there's an awful lot more that you can do with views. It is a very complex but very powerful, easy to use, surprisingly easy to use for really basic stuff, but able to do an awful lot of really complex things. Just if you want to see some really crazy SQL though, turn on the show me what SQL is actually being run to execute this view. It gets pretty long and crazy. Some of the views can also be used for if you've got a rotator up at the top of your screen. Grab me all the images that are tagged with current news. And then from that, pull out just the banner image that we have in that piece of content. And then make a list of those and wrap it up in some JavaScript. And boom, we have a rotator that we can stick into a block up at the top of the screen. Views can create pages. Views can create blocks. Views can create feeds. Views can create CSV or Excel spreadsheet exports. Views can create a ton of different things, and there's a bunch of plugins available for the system that just extend views and what views is able to do. A lot of modules that have some kind of data will also say, hey views, here's how you can use my data. Here's all the tables that I have and all the data that I have. So you as a site builder can reach into that data and create and say, I need these fields from this module that supports views. Reports. The primary one is just kind of a health report on your site to make sure that, hey, are you up to date? Do you have missing PHP extension? And then a lot of modules will stick in a little extra piece. It's like an analytics site might say, yes, I'm able to actually reach out to our analytics platform and get data back. And there's a lot more. So if you guys are ready, let's actually put one in, and let's build some sites. I'm going to switch this. Third. All right, so this is what you should see if you've got everything set up and it's ready to go. Silkscreen, Silk. We are doing all this right now without SSL, which is obviously not the way that you would want to do it in production. But being it's a VM that's living on the same laptop that you're doing the work on, it can't actually get to Pyongyang. So we don't care. Firefox will complain anyway. The advanced options I was mentioning. If your database is not on the local host, then you'll need to change it here. If it's on an odd port, or if you need to add a special table prefix. As I mentioned, you want to use admin for the UID1 for the primary user account because it does have special powers. This has to be formatted like a real email address. It'll complain if you just try to put in user at localhost because it's expecting at least one dot in it. But it doesn't have to be a real one. It doesn't have to actually be listening. Yes, my password is very poor. That would actually be an awesome poor password, wouldn't it? That's what it always sends back to me, so that must be what it's expecting, yeah. Okay, so how many of you guys have got a site up and running and ready to go? You're ready to go? That's kind of a weak hand up. Under functionality, can you guys read this well enough, or do I need to make it better? Under functionality is where you can see what modules are currently available. If it's got a blue check mark, obviously it's enabled. There's some that are turned off. Testing you're not going to need unless you actually want to run all the tests for the site. Syslog is useful if you're running your own server and you're managing system logs. But if you're running on a less than a pizza a month hosting service, then generally they frown upon that because their syslog server and their Splunk server just gets completely overwhelmed with it. So they prefer you to use the database for logging, which is the default that's put in there. What else do we have? Contact form. This is actually a pretty easy one to turn on and see what it's going to do. Do that, turn that one on. Content translation, language and locale. If you're doing a multilingual site, then you can use these to set up sitename.com/en for the English, /fr for the French, /es for the Spanish, what is it, KL for the Klingon. But Klingon? I just enabled contact down in the system. One of the nice things is that there is, under configuration, is where all of the pages that let you set a module's individual settings live. And once you start downloading and enabling modules, it can get pretty busy there. There's an awful lot of stuff and trying to remember where did this particular module shove its stuff, I don't remember offhand. But there's a nice little feature here. If you go into the list of modules and just search for it, it'll filter it down, and then there's a little button here that will bring you to the configuration page for that specific module. If it has permissions, then it'll send you there. And it might also, there's another one there that'll show up called help, that sometimes modules will actually have a little bit of built-in help that you can read over. The other thing you can do is you can actually install modules from the web. And I don't think I'm connected here right now either. So I'm not stomping on you guys. I'm just going to use my phone to connect out. Encountered an error when trying to fetch results. No network address. So let's try refreshing this and see if we can find something now. What silence sounds like? Can't get to backdrop. I was mucking around with the network trying to find a better way to make this work so that it was a little friendlier. Out, so. There we go, that looks better. So if things are working properly, it's able to reach out to the internet and get a list of available modules, and it will put them here for you to start perusing, and there's 15 pages of them so far, 283 total, and more. There's a lot more that are available on GitHub that don't have an actual release. This only shows ones that have actual releases, and it will only show the latest release of that. So if someone puts together a module and then has a few extra patches that they've committed and pushed up and made available on GitHub, but haven't actually packaged into a new release, you're still getting the more stable version by going through this. It's a better way of doing things. Yes. Aha! Madness. We will probably need a couple different modules in order to make that happen. But yes, there should be a way to do that. There is, I think there's an invite module. We'll have to look and see what we can find. In fact, let's do a search. That's not what we need. Trigger actions is not going to help. That I don't know if there's one that's already ported and has a release out. There may be one on GitHub already that's half ported. and if not, then porting them from Drupal is, depending on the complexity of the module, can be done with 2 lines of change. So we'll find out. Let's just grab a few things here. Devel is really useful, so let's add that to the installation queue. Honeypot is a nice one that adds some hidden fields to things like the login page that bots trying to create an account will see and will fill in something, but the CSS hides it from regular visitors. So there should never be anything in it. If we find data in it when they post the form, then we know that they're full of crap, and we just drop them into the bit bucket. Global redirect. Yes, automatically. Copyright notice is a nice one that produces a block that we can play with. And daytime format helps, so we can show that off. Got 5 that we're ready to go with. Say install. Are you sure you want to do this? That'd be a good time to back up your database, and just in case, go with it. Is the modules directory writable by the web server? Okay. It may also need access to, right to the root, the doc root. Each module does a little pop-up. Once it's got them all downloaded, it doesn't have them actually turned on yet, but it does give you the option to do so. So we can just click the top button here and say, let's enable everything. Now we got 5 new ones. Sometimes during installation, a module will leave a little message for you. If you install a whole bunch of them, you may end up with 3 or 4 little messages saying, you know, configure me, also configure me. Let's take a look at the honeypot one real quick. URL is not a bad one. If you want it to be a little bit different, or if you already have a URL field on there, then you might want to change this to be something that is not being used. And then you can decide, so where do we want to put on the registration form, put on the password reset form. We don't, comment forms. Just to make sure that bots aren't trying to post comments onto, and then settings are saved. Date time one that we installed. Under here, content authoring. Under regional and language, date and time formats. When you try to add a new one without the module enabled, from here down is just empty page. All you have is the form part. The module adds in all this extra stuff. And okay, so lowercase m is numeric and capital M is short text. Yeah, F is full text. Hmm? Oh, where you put these? In the format string up here. It says, see the PHP manual, or, the stuff that's right down here, which is actually pulled right from the manual. Oh, that's a hint thing. As soon as you start typing, it's going to disappear. That's just so some help text inside the field to say, this is what I'm expecting here. The content menus are where you're going to be managing all the content. If you need to add something new, the submenu for that. Every single one of these top level ones is a menu as well. Clicking content gives you the whole list of content. It's the same as going to manage content. You can also add, and then it'll give you the list of available. Create a new .us page. NovaLUG is the best lug around. So say we. If we have certain modules installed, then they can add in additional formatting editors. Right now we just have filtered and full setup. Add this in real quick. So this here has got a WYSIWYG editor built in. It's using CK editor for the WYSIWYG editor. And if you want to make something bold or something, yeah. And under the covers, it's actually making the HTML. If you want to change it to your own, then yeah, you can hit source and just start messing around with it. However, if we're using filtered, then the filtered HTML format will actually prevent you from putting in a whole bunch of things. You can't actually add in any extra CSS blocks or JavaScript, or I think even certain links are even prevented. There's a whole bunch of things, and basically the filtered is good for, we have people who want to post comments or something, and we don't really trust what they're going to be typing in, so let's keep it to something sensible. If we set it to full, then that's going to be whatever you want to put in there, you can put in there. Give that to the admins, don't give that to the regular people, because bots will come in and mess your site up, something fierce. Published or not, should. Yes, and you can grant certain roles to be able to use certain kinds of input types. There's a bunch of metadata about the page that we can take a look at. I need to add redirects or create a URL alias for it, because by default, all these pages have got a page URL of node/number. If we wanted to actually be /about us, then we need to actually, either have it automatically generate an alias or put it in ourselves. If we want to add a menu link, we can do that right here as well. Click on the primary navigation, and the weight lets you say what order this should be in. And it's kind of like doing basic programming. So you want to leave some gaps in the numbers so that you can come back and add things in later on. So about us is usually pretty far down, so let's put it around, say, 40 for a weight. And on a separate tab, I'm going to go back up to the home page. We have home and about. When we save this, we now have the About Us page set up, and reload this, home about us. I know there's there isn't a release of it though. There is a markdown module that is there, just not actually, it does have releases, so I can't. Oh, because I'm looking on the, if I look in the right place, duh. Markdown filter. Add that to the queue and install it. So those editors are all done here in the text editing and formats. Just for grins. Anything that's got the term filter in it is going to be something that we can use in our editors. Because what it's actually doing, they're not editors by themselves. They're taking the content and filtering it in whatever, using whatever logic they have. When we get into the content editing, you can now say we've got a plain text of full HTML filtered. Let's create a new text editor. And we're going to call this one the Markdown one. It's not going to have a WYSIWYG editor, so we leave that to none. It's just going to be using standard stuff. We'll let anyone use this. And in doing that, we're going to limit what can be shown as HTML. We're going to make it possible for them to post videos because we're crazy, apparently. Convert line breaks. We're not going to. Yeah, we'll need that. We'll need Markdown, so they can do some very simple bolds and whatnot. And then we're going to make sure that nothing is going to screw it up. And every time that you add a new one in, it adds a new item down here. And so we can now order them. Say, what order should the data be filtered? So let's look for all the video tags first, and then we'll deal with the Markdown. And anything that's left over will get converted. Then we'll do the cleanup to make sure that only certain HTML tags are allowed. And if there's any faulty HTML, let's do the faulty stuff first so that the limit doesn't get confused. And then down below, we can list what they're allowed to use. Each of these filters is going to have, may have some settings, and they'll stick them into some vertical tabs down here. The last thing we need to do on this, say who is allowed to use. I thought I said that already. Oh, I'm sorry. That we want to keep. Full should not be available to everyone. And again, just like with the filters, we can make it so there's a hierarchy of what's available. And the first one that wins, or the first one that a user can use is what they're going to be seeing. So actually putting full HTML up at the top. If you come in as an editor, as an admin, then you'll get full HTML. But if you come in as just a regular authenticated user, well, you can't use this one, so you get the second option. And if you couldn't use that, then it'd look at the third. And if, at the very bottom, everyone can use plain text. Just has nothing in, doesn't allow for very much. And now when we create a new page, it's going to give you Markdown by default. But when you try to add a new page, under formatting options, you're only going to see the ones that are valid. That's the content stuff. User accounts, pretty straightforward. although this is a really good page to show off the anatomy of a typical admin screen. It's got most of the features that you're going to see in other ones. If there's specific actions like an add user or add account or add something, they'll generally be up here at the top with a little plus. If there's any filtering, that'll come up next. You can filter by active. Bulk operations, if we had hundreds of users here and we wanted to select a whole bunch of them and then find me all the ones that are currently blocked, and then we'll unblock them. So there's nothing there, but or cancel all the. Let's find all the ones that are blocked and just erase them as accounts entirely. Bulk operations is what gives you that ability, and it's here on the user thing. It's also possible for it to show up on a lot of other admin pages, especially ones that are listing things like users or content or comments or taxonomy or whatever. It's pretty common for anything that is a table, Drupal's or Backdrop and Silkscreen's built-in table rendering. Let's just say this is a sortable table and automatically gives you the sort buttons here. Hit it once, hit it twice for it to change directions. A lot of these things, you'll see a little gearbox in the upper right-hand corner. Sometimes it'll be of the whole page, sometimes it'll be of just a particular piece of the page. If we go back to the home page, we'll see it on first post, where we can click that and we can edit just that particular node. This here, the Welcome to NovaLUG demo, is a block. It's got its own where you can configure the block. Menus will have them. That's one for that. So there's a menu block here that is the home about us, the primary navigation, but it also gives you fast connections to add links. So whatever page you're on, if you need to fix something on that page, as an admin, you'll see these. As a regular user, you won't, but it gives you a nice, quick contextual access to most of the administration tools that you're going to need. If you're writing modules for Silkscreen, then this is something that you'll want to try to add support in for your own stuff as well. Appearance, this is where we can change what the site looks like. This is a pretty good looking theme, but there's plenty of other ones out there. And we can just kind of go out and pull one down. Here's one that is a port of a WordPress theme. See what that looks like. So the admin section is always going to have one theme, but then we'll go back out to the home page. And just by changing the theme, we change the entire look of the site. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't actually change, or it doesn't have to change the layout. That is done over here in structure under layouts. So right now the home page doesn't have any sidebars. A normal layout has got just a right sidebar, and all the administration pages are going to have no sidebars as well. But if we wanted to, we could just change it to something different. Let's say the home page, we want it to be kind of a complex layout, so we can have lots of some content up at the top, left and right sidebars, and then all kinds of little calls to action and little ads for all the various programs that we're running at the time. Change it over to Simmons and save that. The layouts editor lets you change where things live. If a module has, a lot of these layouts all have a footer. So if it's in, the Powered by Silkscreen was already in the footer, we changed the layout. There's one called footer already, so that block gets automatically remapped into the footer. There's always a content one. There's usually a top, and there's always a header. But sidebars, maybe they're not. The quarters, that's entirely specific to this one here. If we try to add a block here, fine. Add the copyright notice into the first quarter. Save the layout, go back to the home page. So the copyright notice shows up here, but if we then go back and change the layout back to Paris, well, there is no first quarter, and the block just kind of disappears. It doesn't have anywhere to live right now, so it gets removed. But it makes it a lot easier for theme developers who don't have to worry about creating all the regions in Drupal 6 and 7, if you guys did any work with that. The themes themselves defined how the pages were laid out. And it was useful for the theme developers, but it meant that they had a lot of work to do and you couldn't easily port from one look to another. The layouts takes that structure out of the theme and leaves the theme to be more just fonts and colors and general look and feel. Like modules and themes, there's some other ones that you can just kind of go and download and install. There's a way to do that. Under structure, there's custom blocks. So let's put together a meeting advert. Come to our next meeting. Who's speaking next month? Okay. So once we've created that block, then we can go back to the layouts. And add it into, let's add them into the bottom. Now, if we were actually building this out as a NovaLUG site, we probably wouldn't be doing it by hand like that. We'd create a views block that would say, what's the next meeting coming up? Grab the user, the speaker and bio from that, and automatically create a block based on the data in that node. You had a question in the back? That's correct. They do updates every 3 months, and whenever they have an update, I pull in all the code that they've done in the last 3 months and merge it in with what I'm doing, yes. They actually have 3 bugs open right now to grab the last like half dozen updates, half dozen releases of Drupal, go through all the changes that were made, and merge the ones that make sense in. Because they did start with Drupal 7 2 or 3 years ago when Drupal 8 was still being developed. After they had started developing 8, but before they had a full release, and grabbed key features, but before they went into Symfony and merged all that in. So, yes. there is an update check. It will look for updates. I don't remember if there's an automatic update. It may be that it automatically updates modules, but not core. You may have to manually upgrade core. I know a lot of sites would never use that because they'll take modules and say, this almost works, but there's this one bug in the module, and there's already an issue for it. There's already a patch for it. It just hasn't come out yet. And maybe there's something blocking it, but dang it, I need this patch now. So grab the patch, install it myself locally, and then when we do an update, I've got to go through and make sure that any patches that still haven't been applied to that module get reapplied. So there's a lot more manual code management in that. I'm not sure I understand the question. It'll tell you when there's an update that's been released, and then you can go download it, merge in the changes that have happened with your site. When I'm doing this with Git, whatever the first commit is generally going to be, Silkscreen 180 as a base. And then from that, I'll create 3 branches. Well, master, which is going to be what's sent up to production. There will be devel, which is where I'm going to be mucking around with stuff on my own. And then one that's going to be called Silkscreen Core, which only has the core code in it. I don't add any modules. I don't add any patches. I don't add anything at all. It is pure core. When the next release comes out, I change over to that branch, unpack the new one over the old, commit that, and so Git will be automatically tracking just the changes between 180 and whatever update I put in. And I can then do a Git merge of core into devel, and any changes get merged in. That means that if I do any patches to the Silkscreen core itself in devel, they'll be preserved because we're just merging in the changes that came in on the Silkscreen core branch. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to keep a site up to date and sane. Same thing with the modules. I'll copy in a new one, and then I can do a git log of the modules directory to just see what changes have happened in that directory. And if there are any patches that were added in, they'll show up as something other than upgraded module to version blah, blah, blah. And I can just use git cherry pick then to reapply anything that needs to be reapplied. Short term, no. And in fact, this makes things pretty easy. Again, I don't remember. I think there is a way of updating the modules. Certainly at the very least, you can uninstall it entirely and then re-download it. So that's the block itself, probably not. Doesn't it? Because all the block knows is I have a bunch of content and I'm going to be putting it into this region here. Now the logic, whatever code is creating that block, if it knows that it's going to be putting in an image there, then it can use the theme image function, say, what should the image What size should it be and whatnot, and do that. And in fact, the image manipulation is a little more complex than that. Take a look at that real quick. Image styles. So by default, there's 3 image styles that are defined: large, medium, and thumbnail. We can create a new one. And there's a whole bunch of other effects that we can add in. Crop it down to a specific size, resize it, rotate it. You can even just say desaturate, pull out all the color from it. And then there's some other modules that'll add in additional features to it. And there's one that I really like that is in 7. I don't think it's been ported to Backdrop or Silkscreen yet. Where on the editor, when you add an image as a field to a node or to like a profile, there's a little button that says, let me select what part of this image I want to actually show, and gives you a little WYSIWYG editor to say, okay, and it'll actually even say, I want to have 5 different ways of doing this. So if I'm doing it for a banner ad, grab this part of the image. If I'm doing it as a side block, grab this part of the image. And I've seen that used to good effect in there's a Yelp-like site in Australia that had some, for the preview buttons, it had a zoom in of like, the person that is featured in the article. But it's actually just of their head or maybe of a badge that they're wearing or something like that, some identifiable thing that makes you say, hey, I want to find out what this is. And then the image itself is like the full person standing on stage. And when you get into the image, you see the full person there. But it's the same, one image gets copied up and just separate pieces picked out. And I forget what the module's called. It's a great module. Look like you had a, nope. If you're just updating the code, yes, the database is intact. Depends on what you mean by reinstall. If you start from installing Debian again, then no. If you install the module and so there's uninstalling, there's disabling a module. You uncheck it here, you say save, that module is now no longer active on the site. The configuration is still present. If you go up here and say uninstall that module, that will get rid of all the settings for that module. And for some modules, you need to do that before you re-enable it, because they get confused if they see old data, especially if there's like a major number upgrade or something like that, or if they're doing betas. If you're still, if you're tracking the beta of a module, there's no guarantee that the configuration is going to stay sane between 2 betas. And I've actually had some modules where every time they updated, we had to wipe it out and rebuild our configuration. And to be honest, after a while, we got tired of it and just said, we'll wait for the full release, and we're not going to update it until then. It's not broke. We're not going to muck with it. Let's take a look at the structure of a content type. Create a content type for meetings. Let's create another one for, sorry? Oh, did it get, oh, it did. I'm sorry. There we go, I can type. The one thing that every node has to have is a title, because it's got to be able to, we have to be able to list them all on the content page and see what's there. Now, it doesn't have to be called title. In this case, we're going to change it from title to name because it's the name of a presenter. And we're going to change the default URL to, actually, this is already called presenter. So we can just leave it as the node content type, which is going to be presenter/name. And that way, the default URLs, the default aliases for anything that we create here will be presenter/the presenter's name. And we don't need comments on presenters. And we don't need to show who authored the presenter's thing. Or if they're, so let's save and add fields. And do we have an image? Yes, we do. Add a headshot for them. We'll just save that up to the public files. So when we set up all the image profiles, that shows up here in this field. The fields know that they're going to be presenting an image. It's an image field, so it knows it's going to be dealing with that. It's going to offer all the image formats that are available. You can choose one by default. But when you do the actual managing of displays, you can go in and say, manage the default one, the headshot. On this particular one, we'll use a medium, and we'll link it to the content. Load it right. Doesn't need a label at all. So now we have body. Let's change body. Fields, figure. In this case, body we want to be bio. Fields can be used in multiple content types. So you could have presenters as one content type and maybe volunteers as a second one. And you want to have bios for both of them, so we'll use the same bio field for both of them. And maybe we'll use the same headshot field as well. And that way, when you are putting together a list of things, you can say, show me all the presenters or volunteers, and pull out their headshot. And because they both are using the same field, you can get headshots from both of them. It's a little bit different if you're trying to think of content types in an object-oriented way. You might think, well, we have node, and then we'll have a person type node, and then under person type node, we'll have presenter and volunteer. And presenters will have differences from volunteers in that they'll have presentations reference off of them. But they both have headshots and they both have bios. But that's not really the way Drupal does it. That's, or Backdrop or Silkscreen. Instead, it's you just have their content type that we certain fields with it. It's kind of turning object-oriented stuff on its side. Because you can have fields that are in 2 or 3 different ones that are, they would not have a common superclass. Does that make sense? But then when you start going through the views, you can still say, pull out all the nodes that have a particular field in it. Headshots, bios. Okay, so we're good here. User count. We want to add a presenter. Arthur. Nice guy. So we now have a presenter Arthur, and you see it as, well, you may not be able to see it, but it does actually say presenter Arthur as the name here. Now let's create a, on the meeting, manage the fields. change body here to be, would be a good term for synopsis. And we're going to need a entity reference. We don't have references enabled here. So we need to go back to functionality, install a new one. We're about to do that. We do that with references. Not what I expected. So once we've installed node references, then we can go back to here, refresh so we can see the list. There should be a node reference. And the autocomplete is probably going to be the most useful in this case. It'll take the title, in this case the name, and if you start typing, it'll do a search for all the nodes with a particular content type that match that name and let you choose from it. The other way to do it would be to have a select list. It's a just drop down that shows all of them, or checkboxes and radio buttons, which are useful if you've only got like one or two things, but obviously don't scale if you've got hundreds of presenters. And presenters should only pull from there. Add content a meeting. September meeting. Stuff will happen. And the presenter is Arthur. That's misspelled. Let's also, we can edit this on. Spell his name right. Is that right now? And because it's just a reference to the node itself and not the name, 10 minutes? We go back to that bit of content, December meeting. So we fix the node that it's referencing, we fix the listing here as well. Yes, clearly. Not because I've been standing up here and talking for 2 hours. Okay, so 2 ways that you can do the images. Let's go back to our happy structure content type. And I think we already have an image field here, don't we? Yep, we have the headshot. So we're editing Arthur's thing. Add a headshot. Let's see if I can find one. Yeah. There, that'll do. For the preview, If you're looking at it here in the editor, you'll see it with the desaturated one. And in fact, if we go over here to, where was that? Media, image style. Figure the warped. Let's add in a scale and crop. Limit it to 100 pixels by 100 pixels. We go back to see, looking at Arthur here on the actual page, we're still getting the one we had from before. Now we have a desaturated 100 by 100. Gone through menus, taxonomies, views. We've only got 5 minutes left. Views could be a 2-hour presentation all by itself. So, do you guys have any questions? So for schema changes, if you add a field to an existing content type, it's not going to put any data in. It's going to create a new table, but it's not going to actually add any data for existing nodes. However, whatever the default is going to be for that particular field is what you'll get for old nodes. If you get rid of a field entirely, then if it's the last content type to use it, it should delete the table entirely. I don't remember if it actually deletes the data for that particular content type otherwise, but it probably should. Well, I mean, you're going to have a production system. You're going to have all the data there. You're going to have a QA system where you copy down all your data, run the update, apply the new code, run the update, and see what happens. So it can be, it's actually generally fairly sensible. It tries to do the sensible thing. Anyone else? Most of the stuff that I've done for Silkscreen has been really low-level stuff. The configuration stored in the database, which you don't even notice here, is stuff that I did. Adding in some caching support, to make it easier to do caching. You're not going to see it when we're putting together fields and whatnot, but that's something that I've added in. So in terms of what's Silkscreen specific, Postgres is not something that's available in Backdrop, but we can run it here. We're using MySQL because it's a lot easier to set up and it's built in. And for an install fast here, you want to keep it as simple as possible. But that's a thing that can be dropped in. So yeah, there's most of what you see here. In fact, just about everything you could do with Backdrop as well. Just the configuration isn't going to be stored in the database. It'll be stored in files on the file system. I guess that's it. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out.